Hi, this is Randall here in Texas.
And I'm Matt, here in Michigan. Today, Randall and I are reviewing the latest adaptation of a very popular sci-fi book. We're taking a look at Dune. It stars Timothy Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson, Zendaya, Oscar Isaac, Jason Momoa, and Stellan Skarsgård. It's co-written and directed by Denis Villeneuve, who also directed Arrival, Sicario, Blade Runner 2049, and Prisoners, which we have a review of. But before we go any further, if you like this review, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Also be sure to hit subscribe and ring that bell for notifications on our latest videos.
Dune opens as the Padishah Emperor strips House Harkonnen of control over the desert world of Arrakis. House Atreides is chosen as their successor to maintain order and keep the all-important spice flowing. House Atreides has no choice but to accept this honor, knowing that only danger awaits them on the planet known as Dune. Dune had about a $165 million budget, and at the time of recording has made about $130 million at the box office worldwide. Although it is hard to say just how much those numbers actually matter because Dune is streaming simultaneously on HBO Max while it's in theaters for 30 days. This is the third major on-screen adaptation of Dune, which is based on the Frank Herbert book of the same name. The other two well-known adaptations are the 1984 film starring Sting and, of course, the 2000 sci-fi miniseries.
Alright, so for this Dune movie, I actually really enjoyed it, but I guess I have kind of like a little, caveat or whatever. I'm not sure about people who don't have any, background at all in, Dune, have watched any of the previous iterations of Dune or read the books. I'm not sure if this is going to be, a, really good movie for them. And I guess the other part about this is this is part one. This movie even says right at the beginning, Dune Part 1. Denis Villeneuve made this movie with the idea that he's going to be able to finish Dune in a second movie, or at least the first book in a second movie. And so I guess I'm still waiting to see that second movie before I give a full idea on this part of the movie, because I think a lot of it's setting up for that next movie.
Man, Matt stole my thunder with that whole thing about how potentially this movie doesn't work very well for people who know nothing about Dune. In fact, I went to see the film with a friend of mine who had no knowledge about Dune, and those worries were in fact validated when after the showtime, he basically barraged me with questions. What's this? What's this? What's this? And I'm like, oh yeah, they didn't do a very good job of explaining some things. But if you are already pretty enamored with Dune or know a lot about Dune going in, then you're probably in a pretty good spot, actually, as far as this movie's concerned. But my other big, really, really big first impression about this film is they finally got the scope and the size of everything right. That's what struck me the most, where I was like, okay, this is not just Dune on the big screen, obviously, but this is Dune the correct way that it's supposed to be. The Spacing Guild ships are absolutely enormous. Even the ships that the houses own are enormous in and of themselves. Dune is the proper size. The planet Arrakis is the proper size. The scope of this film is exactly what I was expecting, and very happy to see that there. And I also, though, have to admit to a bit of uneasiness about this being part one and maybe never seen another movie based on this particular vision of it. So, we'll see how that goes. The plot of this version of Dune, I think it proceeds at a pretty good pace, except for one or two specific moments. There are spots when they're on Caladan early that are really well paced, and there are some spots later in the film that are really well paced. But the middle of the film, where they're trying to tell the story where, the Atreides are just coming in to Arrakis and they're trying to get everything working and they're trying to make inroads with the Fremen, I felt like a lot of that was rushed. I remember it being more in my mind that the the Atreides were making really good headway, and that just made the Emperor even more concerned about how popular they are because they're making, inroads with the Fremen, and they're actually turning Dune around, and spice production's going up. This movie makes it almost feel like it's only been like a week on Arrakis for House Atreides before the confrontation with House Harkonnen and everything that happens there. So that was like, hey, now we're gonna rush to the action scene that we advertise so heavily on.
For me, like the story and stuff on in this movie, a lot of it is I think this is like the world building movie kind of thing. Like a lot of people have said that Frank Herbert's movie is almost impossible to like put onto screen because there's like so much to like go through and stuff. So it's kind of like, hey, we got to establish like all these houses and stuff. Really, mainly just the two, trees and Harkonnen, and we mentioned a bit about the Imperium and stuff. But a lot of it is like, hey, we're setting up like these worlds. We're setting up, Dune. We're setting up the Freemen. We're setting up all these different things. And then we also have like the religious factions, like the Bene Gesserit and stuff, and what's going on with them or whatever. So for me, it's kind of like how I was saying in my intro that I'm having a little bit more wait and see about the part 2 of this Dune. Because I think a lot of the story that we have in this is like building up to that part 2. This isn't a movie that I think like stands alone necessarily like storyline. I mean, I don't know that we get like we're building up to like the end of this movie. Like I think the end of this movie is a stepping stone to like more stuff. Not so much as, if you're thinking of like a trilogy and stuff. A lot of times movies in a trilogy, they actually have, like a beginning end kind of thing, story, like one thing that they're really like focusing on, and we're just going to continue on a little bit in the next movies. This one really does need that second part, in my opinion. And though it hasn't 100% been confirmed that Warner Brothers is going to do that, please, Warner Brothers, give me that second movie, because I really want that second movie.
Please, Warner Brothers.
Please do it. But I think generally this movie does enough, with the story, building up Paul and like the different relationships and stuff, which I'll get into later when we talk about characters and stuff. That really, enough is there to set up for that next movie. But I guess I am waiting for that part 2 before I give a full thing on like the plot and story of this.
Yeah, but I will touch and kind of reflect on something that you said there. There's a lot more that goes into Dune, and it kind of goes off of our first impressions a little bit, where it's like, hey, you have these storylines with the Bene Gesserits, you have all of these houses, you have the Imperium. In Dune, there's supposed to be a lot of politicking going on. There's supposed to be a lot of like backstabbing and backroom conversations happening. And this version of Dune, at least in this film, this specific film, part 1, doesn't have that. And I found that, very distracting to the plot, but that's coming from me, a person who actually is decently versed in Dune. I imagine a lot of that stuff, if it was filmed, which I think probably was filmed, might have hit the cutting room floor in pursuit of more general moviegoers than you or I or just Dune fans.
Now, me as someone, I have not read the book, and I've watched, 84, Dune several times, and I watched the 2000 miniseries, or what year, 84? What did I say?
It's 84, I'm just apologizing, because it's not that good of a movie.
What's wrong with Gurney? He's not making this.
Now, guard yourself from truth.
Yeah, it's not that good, but I've seen it multiple times. And I've seen the 2000 miniseries, I would say, like, once. And that's, right when it came out. I didn't even get into, like, Children of Dune and stuff with that. But, I generally, with this movie, I didn't feel lost at all. Like, with that knowledge that I did have, I knew what was going on in this one. But I kind of question, going back, like, if you're someone that doesn't know anything about that, I wonder, like, if you're really going to see, like, oh, like, this stuff is actually important. Or, oh, I understand this. Or if you're going to be completely lost. This movie does explain, like, some elements and stuff. And then there's other elements, that aren't at all really explained. And I don't know if it really matters. Like, just talk about kind of like, like the human, like, calculators or whatever, that do all, like, the math and stuff in their head and, like, plot out all the different, like, possibilities of different paths and stuff. Like, we see them, kind of do stuff, but, we don't get an explanation of kind of like what they are, like the Bene Gesserit and stuff too. And this movie does have different ways that it does explain, different things like Arrakis. Why is Arrakis important? Well, we get like a narration, at the beginning and stuff, and we get some information through like as our characters are through like educational programming and stuff too. So it's kind of interesting how this movie takes different approaches on explaining different things because, like I said, there's so much in the book Dune that there's a lot to go through. So you really gotta, massage it a bit to be able to get enough information out to the viewers.
Yeah, let me tell you, as someone who watched it with someone who has no Dune knowledge, try and explain the Spacing Guild and the pilots to someone and like, oh yeah, but that's because of the spice on this planet, and that that's just not there in the story. It's not explained in the plot. So that was like, I don't really understand it. I get it that they're ships, but I don't understand anything else. It's lacking in that regard. But, we'll see if they... Yes, Matt and I have the same ask. Warner Brothers, please. Please!
We want that second movie! So, with the characters and stuff in this movie, one thing that I liked about this, that I don't know if I felt as much as some of the other, iteration stuff, I felt that a lot of the characters were pretty self-aware of what's going on, like the circumstances, like, and the consequences of a lot of their decisions in this movie. I won't say like stuff didn't like surprise them a bit on like the timeline or whatever, but I think they pretty much like understood for the most part what's going on or react for the most part appropriately to what was happening stuff. When talking about like individual characters and like relationships, big one that we have, of course, is with Paul and Lady Jessica. But for me, my favorite was actually with Paul and Duncan. I really enjoyed Jason Momoa's character in this film and stuff. And I think the relationship that the two of them form and stuff, to me, that I had the most like feels, I guess, for.
So for me, the individual portrayals of characters in this movie are pretty good. In fact, I'd say they're pretty accurate to like the source material. So from that perspective, there's not a whole lot of complaining to do. But from a movie perspective, that's a little different. In a book, you can kind of see why like Duke Leto is maybe a little distant from people, but in the movie, they're trying to make him more humanized. Basically, you want audiences to be able to actually feel for them. So every individual portrayal of a character is pretty good in my mind, but the top of the top goes to Paul. I think that Timothée Chalamet does a very good job with Paul, and Oscar Isaac as Duke Leto Atreides, and their relationship, their father-son relationship, is really, really well done. I enjoyed that characterization quite a lot, given how much screen time they don't share, how much screen time they are on, screen together interacting. But one that I found really weird, and like I'm supposed to really like this, is whenever anyone interacts with Lady Jessica, like I'm supposed to believe that Leto and Jessica are in love with each other, because that's what drives her to give a son. Not just that. There's other reasons that are much more Dune-ish, but they actually do love each other in the storyline. But I'm not buying that from this portrayal. I don't see that chemistry there. And when Lady Jessica's with Paul, I equally don't see that, like, hey, I actually do love him more than just this Bene Gesserit plot that happens. Yeah, sure, we're told that on screen. There's even a whole scene of it. Well,
now I'm asking you this one thing. If anything happens, will you protect our son?
With my life.
I'm not asking his mother, I'm asking the Bene Gesserit.
And I still just don't feel that chemistry between Lady Jessica and these characters the way that I wanted to. But again, I'll go back and say, from a character standpoint and how they are in the books, it's probably pretty accurate.
For me, as someone who hasn't read the books, I was also kind of thrown up thrown off by not throwing up. Sorry,
You're,
throwing
you're
off.
throwing up.
I'm not throwing up. No, I'm not that bad. I was also kind of like thrown off with like Lady Jessica and stuff. And it's not necessarily just the scenes with her with like Oscar Isaac or her with, Timothy Chalamet, Paul. It was actually the scenes where she's alone and we see more emotion from her when she's alone. And it kind of, it kind of threw me off a little bit. Like, are they trying to do like a different part? Like, hey, Lady Jessica is kind of different than like the Benny Gesserit Lady Jessica kind of thing. Like, to me, I'm just like, I don't know if it's, trying to show like more personality with Lady Jessica or really what it is. And that's another thing. I guess I'm gonna have to wait and see when we fully flesh out some of the things that you're talking about, like her actual feelings about Paul and stuff too. And we do have one like later scene, like later on in the movie, where we have, Paul and Lady Jessica, and Paul's kind of confronting Lady Jessica a little bit. I think that is a pretty good scene, but I do too have some like questions on, Lady Jessica's true feelings and stuff that kind of threw me off a bit in this movie. But I think the big ones that did throw me off were those scenes, just with her, reacting differently, and yet she's the one that keeps reminding herself, fears the mind killer, fears the mind killer, fears the mind killer throughout the movie.
Yeah, they took those lines. They took those lines away from Paul, which I thought was kind of disappointing, actually. But with Lady Jessica, I think what you're talking about is mostly in front of people. She can't show those kinds of emotions. She has to be the straight laced person when and be strong and give that appearance of strength and stability, and she can't be like that around people. So when she's alone, that's how she can release those feelings. That's what I think they were going for in this movie. But yeah, it can be a little off-putting, basically. And before I forget about it, I know you already mentioned it, so I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time on it. Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho, great job. I wish there was more time spent with him, and I know that if we get a continuation of this universe, eventually that character has some more interesting things to do. But one of my favorite portrayals as a standalone character, definitely Duncan Idaho.
Also, I want to chime in, like the Baron 2 Skarsgård doing the Baron, I think was an excellent job too. We don't get as much, with Brolin as like Gurney and stuff, but I think he did a good job too. I think we have a lot of real good, like you mentioned at the beginning, individual performances in this film were really good. But yes, Jason Momoa definitely stood out for me in this movie.
Honestly, if everything goes down, protect the Skarsgård family, please. They're the way that we're gonna rebuild cinema. Now, what Dune does fantastically, and I would almost say spectacularly, is it stands out as a sci-fi film. Denis Villeneuve is very well known for doing incredible sci-fi, large-scale sci-fi films like Arrival, obviously, and Blade Runner 2049. And Dune, in that aspect, does not disappoint. It has a lot of the things that you want from a sci-fi film. Now, if you are a person who is generally a science fiction film fan, but doesn't know anything about Dune, you're probably going to like this as a science fiction film. And I think that's key. It's like it fits inside of that genre very well, even if you don't know about Dune. So really, if you add in, and maybe Matt will elaborate on this, like some of the other aspects of it, like the action or the adventure aspects, it might be a little lacking for my taste, but its primary genre that it definitely nails science fiction.
Me, Randall, I agree with you. When I think of like this movie, this I was mentioned before is kind of like a world builder, and with the sci-fi aspects of this movie, I absolutely like. From like the technology standpoint and stuff, for me it was believable in this movie kind of thing. And even if we want to go, with the sandworms and stuff, is it like the best depiction of sandworms? I guess that's up to debate, and I'm no expert on worms or whatever, or worms that would live in sand. But for me, a lot of the stuff with what this movie builds is very believable. And that's the thing too, if you can get lost into like a world or whatever, I think that's a plus. And this definitely gets me lost, I'm in Dune kind of thing is how I kind of feel. This is one of those movies I'd say that if you're gonna watch it, definitely watch it in theaters for the first time. If you ever think you're gonna watch this movie, please, 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 please go to the theater, because I think Denny put a lot, and the people that worked on this film put a lot into making these worlds feel real, give you broad scope and everything on these worlds and stuff. I think that nailed it. Now, one of the other things like you were kind of hinting at that might touch, I guess I'd call it like a sci-fi adventure. The adventure parts, I think they're okay. I mean, really, you want to be like Paul Atreides kind of thing, and you're feeling like you're going, like you're venturing out and doing different stuff. I guess I get that kinda a bit more. I don't know, maybe we'll see more of that in part 2, please. Part 2, please. Give us part 2. Maybe we'll get to see more of the adventure aspects with Paul and stuff in part 2. But for this one, I would say sci-fi, nailed it. Hit it out of the park. Adventure, I mean, mixed bag. Yes and no, I guess. Alright, so one of the things that we were talking about on, like, Syfy is, like, building these worlds and making them, feel, real and, really hitting on the sci-fi. For me, I really didn't expect Hans Zimmer music to play such a role in making that actually be real, at least for me. A lot of times with like music, it's like, hey, here's music to make you feel a certain way about, events that are happening and stuff. I didn't take that as much from Hans Zimmer's, music. I felt more like, hey, we're establishing like the general feel of like the whole movie, of like these houses and stuff, and of this planet Arrakis, Dune. To those, I think the music plays such a big role in those elements, and I actually didn't expect it to as much. I mean, I probably should have. It's Hans Zimmer, and Hans Zimmer's normally really, really great. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess I was surprised by, how big of a role and the actual role that the music plays in this film.
I was actually kind of disappointed. Not that the music was bad. The music's great. It's Hans Zimmer. But I was kind of expecting more like Gladiator feels, where the music was really going to immerse me. And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It's really good. I'm not going to say it's bad, because it's not. But I felt like the immersion wasn't there from the music standpoint. Yeah, that's my take on the music. But what I really didn't see coming, and maybe this just doesn't fit here very well in this segment, is because I saw some warning signs, and I was a little bit worried about this. I did not see the title screen saying Dune Part 1. You've advertised this entire film heavily as Dune. Just Dune. I knew going in, I had this bad feeling, like, you know what? This novel, and obviously this collection of novels, not just the single book, is really hard to make into a movie, as the original 84 movie testifies to, really. And that was absolutely true. So why was I surprised by it saying Dune Part 1? Because they advertised it as Dune. And I thought that was very mean of them to do.
Yeah, just go and reacted to that. I agree. I mean, it's kind of surprising that Warner Brothers decided to do the, like, hey, let's wait and see how this movie does before we decide to finish it. Instead of just, have more, I guess, trust or whatever in, the filmmakers to actually just say, like, yes, let's put together for these 2 movies at least to tell this story. And I think a lot of it, like, Denis Villeneuve is doing a pretty good job of, like, taking, time to actually look into, Dune to give it a good thing. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Randall. I was surprised too. Part 1, even though I knew Denis wanted to do a second movie in this and that this was going to be half a story, it was a surprise too to see that in the beginning of the movie.
Now, the other thing that surprised me quite a bit, and I alluded to this earlier, I think this is so for general moviegoers more than someone like me, but Dune is really political. It's got a lot of politicking in the story, And this version of it, at least in this very specific first part of this, telling of it, is very light on politics. And I did not see that coming because I went in thinking, oh yay, we're going to have a great story about all of the stuff that's going on in the universe. And you said it's a world building movie. And I'm like, okay, more politicking world building, please, because it's Dune. So I was actually quite surprised by just how little politicking was actually there. But maybe in a sequel, Warner Brothers, please.
All right, so in conclusion, this is a movie that I really did enjoy, but I still need that part 2. Please. Randall and I can't reiterate this enough. We want that part 2 to fully feel satisfied on this. I'm still questioning whether or not this is a movie for people that don't really know anything about Dune. I don't know if you're someone that doesn't know anything about it, it's going to go in, watch this film, and be like, oh, I need to go in and look into the books, and I want to see more and stuff. That I really don't know about, but yes, if you want to see this film, please go see it in theaters. I think that is the ultimate experience for this film.
Now, I'm gonna just say I absolutely recommend that you go see Dune and go see it in theaters because this level of science fiction eye candy just does not come around very often. So, big sci-fi fans, go watch it. Dune fans, go watch it. General moviegoers, I echo what we said earlier. It's just maybe you'll just like it because it's a good story and it, you just, oh yeah, that was fun to watch, but you might not understand everything. However, I also want to caution against overly high expectations of someone going in. This is, honest to goodness, just the beginning of the Dune story. So when you get to that end and you're like, oh wow, I don't feel like that, concluded. Well, that's because it definitely did not conclude.
This is only the beginning.
And there is no guarantee that we will actually ever see that conclusion. But as we've made very apparent throughout this entire review, Warner Brothers, please? But of course, we always want to know what you guys think. Have you seen Dune? Are you a big fan of Dune? Do you like our thoughts on Dune? Comment down below this video. Let us know. We also have other YouTube videos, new movie reviews, flashback movie reviews, TV series reviews, and of course some deeper dive discussions.
Also, be sure to check us out on Facebook page. We put a lot of posts on a lot of our different fandoms. You've probably seen quite a few Dune posts lately as well. We also post a day before our reviews to come out, so you know what the next topic is going to be. Put us on our schedule. We have reviews that come out every Monday and Thursday. For now, I'm Matt here in Michigan. Have a good day, everyone.
And I'm Randall here in Texas. I'll see everyone next time.
Next time on No Market Media. Please consider checking out some of our other videos.